Hello everybody, welcome to another hands-on live stream with me, Christian Schiller. If you're interested in knowing more about what I do, you can find details at christianschiller.com, or wherever you are watching this video. You can subscribe, say hi, leave a comment. Today, this is actually going to be the third video related, or third stream I should say in this case, the third stream related to this particular project that I have covered actually twice before. And it's going to be about Raycast. Raycast is a macOS at the moment, although I have my suspicions they may be working on some non-Mac versions, but we'll see. A macOS application that is kind of like a replacement for Alfred, for Spotlight, that kind of hit a shortcut and launch applications, do a bunch of different things from a quick access command. They're usually called productivity tools. It's sometimes hard to summarize exactly what they mean, but I think you've probably used them. Windows has an equivalent. GNOME in Linux, all operating systems seem to have a sort of equivalent. I've covered Raycast twice actually, once when it first came out, and secondly more recently when there have been a lot of updates. But in this episode, I'm going to look specifically at how to create an extension for Raycast and what that means. And that is something they have actually added externally anyway since the last video. Right, let's jump right into the screen share. Now, the problem with an application like Raycast is trying to make it visible. Obviously, the browser here is pretty visible. My VS Code screen is going to be pretty visible. Terminal is going to be pretty visible, but something like that is a little hard to make visible. But it doesn't matter too much because I'm not actually going to be spending too much time in Raycast itself. Raycast has this whole concept of extensions, and I will jump in. You can see here in the Raycast preferences itself. I'll zoom in a little bit. A whole bunch of different ways you can extend the tool. These are commands. These are scripts and commands that are available that you can assign to different keys and aliases and enable them and disable them. Scripts that you can use with AppleScript, JavaScript, I think Bash as well. Shortcuts to specific applications, and then quick links, which are something that I keep meaning to try more with, but I haven't quite got to yet. And the scripts one is one way you can do this, but then I think the extensions option is kind of the preferred option. They try to push you down towards now, and has quite a nice API, which we'll be digging into in this video. So let's come back. And you can see some of the ones I've installed here. You can see types. So I've installed a Caffeinate, which lets you do the old kind of don't let my computer sleep type thing. Homebrew, I've installed a Docker one. I must admit, I've installed quite a few that I always endlessly forget to actually use. This is one of the problems of this sort of thing, but I try my best. And there's a whole bunch here. Now, I wanted to build one for Trello. I use Trello quite a lot. Trello is basically the kind of source of everything I do. And one of the reasons I like it is it's relatively simple, but you can extend it. And it's also very extensible. It has quite a good API. I use it with things like Zapier and all sorts of stuff like that. And they have their own kind of automation tools as well. But I did not see an extension for Raycast for it. So I thought it's a good excuse to make something I would use and actually learn the process. I'm not going to jump straight into creating the extension immediately because I actually want to show you the onboarding experience for doing that, because this is something that I sort of spend a lot of time looking into, is the sort of developer experience of tools. And actually they did quite a nice job, and I kind of want to show you the steps I went through and then jump into what I ended up creating. And yes, these are mostly created with React, Node, and TypeScript. I mean, they're kind of not really separated. They're sort of all part of the same ecosystem. So it is React. React has a bit of a learning curve, and this is where I have definitely hit some issues, my React knowledge. I am learning React pretty quickly because a lot of projects I'm now touching use it. I don't know if I really like React, but there we go, whatever. No choice in this particular instance. And you can see there's some reasonable documentation here. There's some examples. I based quite a lot of what I did on the to-do list, information, and then a lot more context around the user interface as well. So let's just actually follow the getting started guide because I want to show you kind of what steps it takes you through and actually the experience. So you can see some system requirements, very good. One of the things I was going to mention a bit later in the video was actually the community in the Raycast Slack channel has also been very helpful and have suggested solutions to most of the problems I had. I just need to get around to fixing them. So sign in, I have done that already. That was actually slightly fiddly, I think probably because I'm using Safari, but I got there in the end. I won't go through that process right now. And there's a variety of templates, and this is one thing I actually really liked. So you can actually create extension right from Raycast itself. I think that's visible enough. I won't be spending too much time here, but I think you get the idea of what to see there. And now we can fill in some of the template here. So I'm just going to, let's just go for a Hello World one right now. I'm not going to spend too much time in it, apart from this step. And I think, I'm not 100% sure if this actual interface we're looking at right now is also created with React or some kind of React to macOS bridge. I have no idea. But one of the things I do like about it is they've created an experience that you don't have to know Swift or Objective-C or something quite niche to program an extension. But unlike a lot of other JavaScript-based options, you don't notice much of a performance hit. I've got quite a few extensions installed. I'm sure there's going to be, depending on the amount of dependencies installed and things like that, then I haven't noticed too much of a slowdown. So the bindings between that kind of JavaScript side and the native side seem to be pretty good, but I'm not 100% sure how they're doing that. So let's just go for some very basics here for now. And you have templates here that you can follow. I think the option here says just to use the markdown one, but actually I might pick a different one because I just want to show an example anyway. So for example, the list and detail. And you have a command name and a subtitle and a template. That's all fine. And we'll just create the extension. So you get this quite nice walkthrough, and we can now manage it and then submit it later, but we won't. I think probably the only thing that would have potentially been better here would be to have a shortcut way from that screen to jump into the folder of code. That might have been the only thing that could have been improved in that process. Everything else is actually quite smooth. Because now I will to go back and find it, but you get the idea here. And we can see the source here, and we haven't installed any dependencies yet. Actually, that's kind of what the documentation right behind is telling us to do. So let's do that. So paste that in. And this is where I actually found it kind of interesting as well. Once you've run this command once, it kind of sort of sits there, still available. You don't have to have this running the whole time. I don't really know when that switchover happens, but I am not running that command, and you can still see my Trello extension is there. And we should see, yes, there we go. And this is kind of an example of the UI. Here, a very basic example of the UI. So you get the idea. And all of that is accomplished relatively easily. It's Raycast's own module that provides a lot of the magic, as it were. And you can kind of see that here, yes, on here. And a bunch of other reasonably limited amount of dependencies, some of which we could probably remove when we go to production, but you get the idea. Reasonably straightforward there. And there's some custom things in the package.json file that relate to the command and a description and an icon and an author and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go too much more into the kind of getting started side of this. You can see a lot of what we just did here already, and then the preparing an extension for the store, and we can look at that a bit later. But I'm going to jump into the Trello extension that I've been working on instead, and the opportunity to go into something a little more complex. This actually also now gives me another example to show another extension, VS Code extension. So I can actually find my recent projects here. I moved, because this is how the pull request model works, I moved my extension into the extensions repository, which I cloned from GitHub. Whilst Raycast itself, it is not open source, the extensions obviously are and are submitted by people. It kind of follows a similar model to something like Homebrew, I suppose, in that there's one large repository and people submit their extensions to it. And you can see then in the big folder here. And of course, it's not quite there yet, but if you've ever contributed to Homebrew, you know that this listing gets incredibly unwieldy at a certain point, but it's something that they'll have to worry about later, I suppose. I will say, and this is one of the nice things, of course, of having things open source in the GitHub repository, is not being the world's best React developer, as already mentioned. I took quite a lot of learning from the NPM search extension. So I learned from people who'd done things before. This one here, created by Mr. Martineau. Thank you very much, Mr. Martineau. Actually helped me quite a lot. It probably doesn't show as much as it did in the early development steps, but I learned quite a lot. It had some comparable things I wanted to do. Let's have a look at the structure here. We have a README. I think that's reasonably obvious. I haven't added very much to the README yet. I will later. There's not so much the extension can do right now. The package.json file is probably the next important step. And some of this we've already seen. We've got the name, the title, an extension, an icon. I did change that to what you would expect, the Trello icon, and the command. I would probably add some more commands to this at a later stage, but we'll leave it for now. This is where we get into some of the nice aspects of the API, where I really feel like they've actually thought through the API quite well so far. I mean, even my extension is still relatively simple, but the kind of thing you're going to want to do. So there is an API for preferences. So I have set here, this is my sort of publisher. This is a Trello Atlassian thing, my kind of publisher API token that I have hard-coded as a placeholder, because actually it's not private. It's connected to me. If you have to get API access, which you will have to do with the extension, that's the nature of using the Trello API, you'll see it anyway. So I've just put it in the file. I think what I actually want to do is make it set by default. The placeholder is not quite the same. I'll come to that later. And then there's also another preference for your personal key, which you have to get. And I will put mine in later. When I fix that problem and run it again, we'll look at that. And then you can access those preferences through other API, SDK API calls in the code. And again, it creates the UI for you. So you get the kind of the UI where people have to put their preferences. And actually you can see, for example, if you go into the extensions list here, yeah, there we go. So they're hidden. So that's good. You can see the UI aspect here for where you would put those. So that's all handled for you. The rest of this is relatively standard. There is a custom Ray command that comes through one of the packages that does a bunch of different things. Now, let's then get into the meat of it, and hopefully where I won't embarrass myself by not really completely understanding the React, but what I understood from it anyway. And as a relatively React noob, I found it pretty easy to do this, actually. It didn't take me too long, and I made a few mistakes, and there's a few things that are not quite right yet, but actually it didn't take me too long. Firstly, what I did, and I learned this from the NPM extension, was I made a model, a Trello result model. This is not fully fleshed out, and as I add more to the extension, I will add more to this. You can see at the moment, this is, actually let me show you. I want to show you the API. You can see here the model, the call that Trello returns. You have a whole bunch of options, and then you have the cards list of all the different cards, whether there's a query in that or not. And initially, I didn't have this. I had the card as the top level, and then I realized I was going to have some problems there. But I decided to do that instead, so it actually represented the API calls more. So I haven't included all the fields. I've only included the fields that I need at the moment. I will probably add more at a later date. And then the label, which can be more than one. I haven't really exposed the label in the UI yet, but also because the way I've exposed it, it makes it searchable. So say if someone wanted to search not just for a card, but also for like a project or some other thing. And there's a lot of things I can add to the ability for people to search for, but it's a pretty basic extension right now. And then in the index TypeScript file, we have the various dependencies, or the external packages we're going to need. So the model, the list item, the task that actually fetches the to-dos. We'll come to those in a minute. We have React, and we have what we're using from the Raycast API, which is just a list of to-dos. The toast, and I must admit, this kind of area, this is the state in React, is an area where I get a little bit lost, but we have the results, and we have kind of waiting for results, a loading screen, because actually, even in my relatively simple Trello account, I have quite a lot of cards, and they take a modicum of time to load. So I'm actually going to scroll down and come backwards and forwards. So this is where we get the UI element, and actually they have included nice inline hints on documentation from the API. But we could also have a look and there's the API reference here for the various things you could include. So this is the loading state, the search bar placeholder, and then when text changes. And this is something I did differently from the NPM one. The NPM one only works on a search, and that's what triggered it, whereas I wanted with the Trello one to list everything and then filter to a search. And that was actually probably the bit that took me the most amount of fiddling backwards and forwards to get quite right, actually. The throttle one I included without entirely knowing what it means, but I think it took it as meaning for long lists. It seemed reasonable. And so in this particular case, every time there is a set of results, it loops through the length of the results and shows a to-do list item, which we'll come to in a minute. And again, you can see here, this is the default fetch everything, and we have search as well. Just take the input, search the list. And this is where it's interesting because with Trello, I have to use two different APIs. The listing all is one API, the searching is another API, which is why we have fetch to-dos and search to-dos. So that's a slight difference there. Let's take a quick look at the searching part and then come back more to the relevant part to Raycast. The fetch to-dos, this is mostly kind of generic JavaScript apart from the preferences aspect here. Where we get the preference values for the token and the API token. And here is the URL. This is something also I need to fix. And actually, I've just realized looking at this right now, this would not be very useful as a public extension. So it's a good job I'm going through this now and realizing that there's something that needs to change. Returning only my Trello to-dos is not going to be very useful to anybody. So that is something I will fix. That is probably going to be either I need to change the API endpoint used or I need another preference there. Not 100% sure. I have to have a think about that one actually. So that's something I just noticed. But you can see here I'm passing in the preferences tokens and we get the the response, an error if there's an error, and this is for the search. So it's pretty much the same, apart from it adds a search term. And actually I could see here that this API is generic. So I'd probably just need to change that to a generic one. I think I've been actually making a completely different to-do aggregator in Flutter for some time. And I think I just pulled that same API whilst I was building that application, because I was kind of making it for myself. And it returns this Trello fetch response, which we can see in a few different places here. That might be and that's the response model that I just looked at. So the only other thing to look at is the list item. This is where I took a lot of fiddling around as well, and I'm still not 100% sure if it's working completely how I want to. And this might be, I think this is probably why I'm getting an error at the moment, because the code I'm looking at here is my code where I've been switching things around a little bit. So I may do a bunch of, I can do a git revert, can't I? The correct way. But I was trying to re-represent the model in a different way, and that's where I got a little bit stuck. So this is not quite correct at the moment. But we could see here, matching the list for each response, we create a list item. A lot of these were optional. So you can see in the API here, I think the only one that is required is a title, actually. And a lot of the others are just useful. So I have an ID, which comes from the ID of the to-do item. The name is the title. This accessory title is one I've been trying to get right with putting the due date. I'm getting a little bit lost there with getting the type right. So that's something I'm still working on. The description, if there is any, as a subtitle, and actually you can see in the documentation here what that shows as, an optional subtitle displayed next to the main title. Keywords, this I think is still a bit in progress as well. I might comment that out for now. And then actions, this is what you see here, basically. So on every item in any kind of list in Raycast, you have these various actions. And you can define those, and they can do all sorts of different things. There's another UI element here of an action panel that defines the various different action panel items you can have. So an obvious one for me to add at a later date, which will probably be my next task, is a mark this Trello card as in progress, to do, done, etc., etc. I need to think about that a little bit, but that kind of thing would be quite useful, of course. At the moment, all I have is an open in browser action. Open it in Trello. Pretty straightforward, not massively useful right now. So there's definitely a few things I want to experiment with there with the UI. So what I think I should do at this point is undo some of the mess I made of things so we can actually run this. Hopefully we can actually just get something working. Not the most up-to-date changes, but something working. And you could see if I go back into, where was that? It was down here. You can see that there's the error. It's a TypeScript error because this is not in the model, basically. That's why I was doing it. Now I remember why I was doing it, because that's not in the model. So it works, but it's not great. And that was one of the things I was trying to fix. But it does mean that in the meantime, we can just get it working. So now we should, there we go. So we have the to-dos, only this at the moment. So yeah, I'm not signed in on the browser. I actually use the desktop application for Trello. And that's another thing to potentially try and add is a URL, I always forget what macOS calls it, but like the URL pattern where you can recognize it in an application. I don't know if the Trello application will do that, but you can see. So again, here's just all of the cards assigned to me. I could do a search as well. And now we get the ones. And yeah, I'm getting an error certain times as well. This is something, there's still a few things I need to fix, but it's mostly working. And yeah, you can see that there. And I think this is where I still get some problems. Yeah, When I start to refresh the search, I get an error again. So there's still a few things I need to fix here, but the basics are there. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make, was that all of what you see up until I started playing with things and trying to fix some issues did not take me very long. And that's actually what I like most about the experience so far. It hasn't been that complicated, that hard to make it. And then you kind of get into the fiddly TypeScript, React issues. The actual Raycast aspect of it has been fairly straightforward. So the things I'm trying to change still are because one card in Trello can have multiple labels, how to show them all is something I'm still trying to figure out here. The due date, I think I just got very mixed up with types. I think often my biggest stumbling blocks with React are using TypeScript and trying to figure out what type something should be. And I was thinking, well, it's a date, it should be a date, but then I have to convert the date back to text. So why am I pulling in text, converting it to a date to then convert it back to text just because I'm obsessed with it being a date? Something I need to fix as well. And obviously rework a lot of these values based on the updated model is another thing I need to do. The icons here is actually an interesting one as well. They are predefined here. I think, where's the list? There's a list somewhere. Built-in icon. Yeah, so there's some predefined ones. I guess this is something to do with a dependency or something to do with a style or something like that, but I guess you could add your own. I don't know, but you could see there's a few things you can do with images as well. I don't think I'm going to. I don't think I want to load a file from Trello and then try and render it. That could be a little too tricky. But you could see there's a lot more that can be done. So in addition to the very simple action I've had, there's actions for copying to a clipboard, opening a specific application. This is a desktop application after all that has integration points with the operating system. Files and folders, paste actions, push. So pushing a new view to the navigation stack, I guess from different locations and things like that. It could be something I think about, but I'm not sure. Show in Finder, not so relevant for the Trello one. Submit a form. This could be something I could look at, for example, like the form we saw in the creating an extension itself. I suppose that's comparable. It's, here we go, creating an issue in GitHub, for example. So there you go, a form. So this would be a perfect use case to create a card in Trello. I'd have to again think in the UI perspective about what I would show here, because Trello, for example, allows lots of customization. So how far do I go? Do I keep it very basic? What do I show? What do I load? That kind of thing. That's something to think about. But it's something I think I would like to do, actually. Toast we saw briefly when there was a problem. I could manufacture a problem again just to demonstrate it. I think I have to search and then clear the search. Yeah, so that's the toast there. Keyboard shortcuts, that's definitely something I will add at a later date. Environment, clipboard, not particularly relevant to my task. There's some things I could do. Like the Trello desktop application doesn't actually integrate with the Finder not at all. Actually it does a little bit, but in a very limited way. So I could potentially maybe do some kind of something. I'm not sure what yet, but there's something I could do there. So let's just wrap up maybe with the preparing and publishing, just to wrap up that kind of stage, and I'll show you what I have done. You've seen most of it already. A Raycast account username, which is always easy for me. License has to be MIT. I don't know, but I'm sure you could have a discussion with the community if you wanted to change that. NPM for dependencies, distribution build, naming. This is actually a good opportunity to point out what happens when you submit the pull request. Let's come to that in a second. command titles and subtitles, all very useful. Additional readmes. I do need to update the readme for the various API keys and things like that. I think that's okay. UI access, there's guidelines of when to use things. Publishing. So here we go. So this side of things is something that's useful to show. So you make a pull request. They ask for, there is a template when you submit. They ask for a video. I made a video. As you can see, people tried to help me here. People from the community and the team, which is very nice too. And I will admit that the local tests versus the tests that run on CI don't completely match. I keep getting an error here that I'm not entirely sure what the error is because I don't see any details. And I've run all the tests that I mentioned to run and I don't get any errors. So that's something I'm still trying to figure out. I would think and assume that the test on CI might be stricter, maybe. And I know there are some problems, so maybe the CI is picking them up when my local setup isn't. Who knows? But you can see the process here, basically. And that's pretty much it. I don't know then how long it takes for it to become live. I'm not 100% sure. The community, the API and the packaging aspect of the extensions is still pretty new. And yeah, there's a Slack community. I won't open it up because it will reveal a lot of other Slacks I don't want to reveal, but it's a very helpful community. It's quite a big positive that a lot of the team are in similar time zone to me, which is a nice change. They're not all in America. And that's the process so far. I think after I've done the Trello one, there's obviously some more enhancements I will add to it, but I will probably create some others. I'm not sure what yet, but I will probably create some others. I wouldn't mind creating some that do things with the Finder and with macOS itself, something a little more nuanced than calling APIs there. But I'll think about what they could be. You can find my code on the repository Raycast extensions on GitHub. And it should hopefully be live soonish when I've fixed a few things. You can also find more details about creating the extension on developers.raycast.com. Good experience. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I think made me feel like I'm starting to understand React a bit more than I thought I did. I have built some, I actually maintain 2 extensions for Visual Studio Code, which also uses TypeScript, and I'm starting to get my head around TypeScript. And actually the company I work for, our UI is built in React. So I don't work on the UI, obviously, but I have interactions with it that mean I have to learn some. So all of that aside, I found the experience very good. The onboarding, the getting started was very easy. Those templates they provide for you really helped. Having everyone else's extension available for me to dig into and try and find examples of what I wanted to accomplish. And let's face it, the kinds of things you want to do with a tool like Raycast, there's a lot of commonality. It's not a tool that is completely general purpose. It has kind of some intended purpose. So you can often find examples that match a little bit of what you're trying to do to help you. So look out for that extension soon. If you don't have Raycast already, then download it. I really like it. And you can find the other videos I've done on, you have to be on YouTube now because it was some time ago, for a more general introduction to what you can do with Raycast. And it's a fast moving community, so keep a lookout for what they're up to. I expect more. I don't know what exactly, but I look forward to it. If you enjoyed this live stream, then you can find more at christianchiller.com. You can subscribe, say hi, leave a comment, head over to my YouTube channel, and you can find an aggregate on my website of all of those videos. Until next time, thank you very much for joining me, and thanks to those who joined me in chat today. Always nice to have people chatting along whilst I'm talking. So, thanks very much for joining me, everybody. Take care.